Hello, everybody. It's the Great Johannes speaking for yet another podcast episode. As you can tell, I'm doing them regularly nowadays from Monday through Thursday, 8 p.m. Amsterdam time, which is about 2 p.m. New York time. You're welcome to join and ask questions and keep it interactive. On today's topic, the main topic, is I'm going to have quite a discussion about, how do you call it, Western reproductive archetypes that were embedded in, for example, the old German fairy tales of Snow White, Schneewittchen, and also Sleeping Beauty or Dornröschen. And I got a fly problem. That's okay. And this is because Jordan Peterson, yes, the controversial psychologist, recently did a podcast episode about his reading of the old Snow White fairy tale. And it caught my attention because in it is buried some greater truth that tells us something about the reason why the European heathens converted to Christianity. Because Christianity to them was the radical new counterculture. You have to imagine it this way for a moment, that in heathen Europe, the populations were much smaller than they were today, and the heathen people had lower birth rates and a lot of child deaths. Then Christianity comes along and it offers young people, yes, the youngsters were the ones most likely to convert to Christianity because it offered youngsters an escape from the old ways and allowed them, first and foremost, to start large Christian families of their own. After all, that's how Christianity defeated heathendom in Europe. It was through birth rates, by having higher birth rates. The heathens, in my view, eventually did try to fight back against the Christians by also increasing their own birth rates. Part of the Norse mythology that you can read about in the Eddas by Snorri Sturluson, for example, or the Poetic Edda by an anonymous author, contains some hints, some information of the fact that heathens understood that Christians and their missionaries were winning the birth rate war and attempted to rekindle their own birth rate, for example, by sexualizing Thor and Freya a little bit more, these Germanic gods and goddesses. Freya then became a more overt goddess of sexuality and female fertility. And Thor, of course, with his hammer, the phallic symbol, became much more of a symbol for male fertility. But alas, it didn't work because in the end, the Christians who had started much earlier in this race won over most of Europe until even finally, ultimately, Scandinavia, which is sparsely populated even today, also became Christian. Maybe on a side note, just for a brief moment, I know Donald Trump wants the Epstein thing to go away, but it doesn't seem to be working, does it? It's very obvious, actually, that his MAGA base is not satisfied with the way he handled the Epstein thing, now claiming that it's a hoax that was made up by Biden and Obama. No, he says that because they destroyed the documents, and so now he can pretend it was a hoax. Clearly, Donald Trump was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He was friends with Prince Andrew, who raped Virginia Giuffre, right, while he was friends with Donald Trump around that era in the 1990s or so, 2000s. It's just clear as the day that Donald Trump is involved in the Epstein case himself. He's implicated. And of course, that's why he chooses the meltdown process now, or the meltdown option, to go crazy and say, well, if you're MAGA and you supported me in the past and you don't support me anymore, then I don't need you anymore. And that's why a lot of MAGA people are throwing their hats off, throwing their hats away. You know, screw this guy. Who is this guy, right? He promised to go after the thousands and thousands of men and women who visited Epstein's island or Epstein's private house in New York City. You know, who are the hundreds and hundreds or possibly thousands of girls who were victimized by all these rapists, by all these weird sickos in politics, in media, in tech? Where are these people? Where are the victims? I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell, the co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein's, she's been convicted to 20 years in jail. On the grounds of what exactly? What was she convicted of? of raping girls? Which ones? Who else raped those girls? So there's a Maxwell list as well. And it's just not going to go away, because I think we all know at this point that Donald Trump himself is involved. And that's why he wants this thing to die. And it's just not going to happen. So wish him good luck for the, what is it called? The midterm elections coming up, because he's going to lose bigly. Loser. Hey, everybody. I'm not so sure if I'm your sweetheart. Donald Trump likes kids. That was my question. Or would he be into girls or boys? Right? Let's find out. Someone's got to know something. It's always a mystery as to why no one in these Secret Service echelons ever leaks actual truthful information, right? It's amazing how maybe 1 million people in the Secret Service or working with the Secret Service in the USA, they all keep their mouths shut, zipped up, and nobody says a damn thing. That's really, really mysterious, isn't it, right? Yeah. All right. Today I want to talk about the Western archetypes or the archetypes of Western reproductiveness. Partially because we see the damage being done to our young people. The LGBT circus, it's killing the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha who have been bombarded in their schools with this content on screen, right, in the classrooms. I thought I had it bad in the 1990s going to high school, but these kids, nowadays, they come out of high school totally traumatized by the gay porn and the LGBT Nazi propaganda. It's just so bizarre, really, that we need to understand what is this all about. Well, so Jordan Peterson recently did a podcast episode where he did a reading of the Snow White tale, the original one by the Grimm brothers. And I'm going to quote Peterson now. I've prepared a little speech here. I'm going to quote Peterson several times, and I'm going to go through the whole thing. It's probably going to be like maybe up to 20 minutes or so to get through it. And then we can also go back to talking about, the cozy people in the comment section, right? All right. Now, although Jordan Peterson is a falling star whose unexpected affiliation with dubious politics came as a betrayal to his white male book buyer base, once in a while, the former Canadian psychologist shows us a glimpse of the genius he could have been if he had shunned wearing split suits, because it makes him look like the devil. In his podcast, episode number 558, he discussed the original Snow White tale by the Grimm brothers from Germany, and casually hands us, however, a powerful weapon. Discussing the nature of the evil witch who envies her own daughter in the movie Snow White, movie, book, story. Peterson describes this witch as a devouring mother. Such a mother is, in essence, a caring figure, but her dark side, her shadow, compels the jealous mother to sabotage her own children instead of nurturing them. So, quoting Peterson from the aforementioned podcast episode 558, one of the things that you see in pathological families is that the parents who've made a house of their own life become jealous of the unblemished possibilities and opportunities that lay themselves out in front of their children. Instead of encouraging their development in the world, the parents start to regard the fact that their children haven't been corrupted yet by laziness and spite. They start to regard the contrast between that childhood potentiality and their own wasted and pathological lives as unbearable. To reduce the contrast, instead of straightening the hell up so that they're not embarrassed in front of their children, these parents encourage their children or discourage their children from moving forward and encourage pathologies in them so that the competitive stress is lessened. The pathologies Jordan Peterson is referring to can be self-sabotage, self-hatred, or even homosexuality and transgenderism. This isn't a new insight. During the 1950s, for example, many psychologists working in the Western world agreed that homosexuality in men was largely caused by their disappointed mothers. i.e., mothers who had preferred a daughter to the son they had conceived, but who couldn't hide their disaffection toward the child, thus forcing this unwanted son to try and behave more as a daughter to her than as a man, just in order to please his unhappy mother. Now, I'm quoting Jordan Peterson again from that same podcast. You see plenty of that, by the way, in the modern world, with mothers, for example, who utilize their demented identity politics with regard to their children. My boy is really a girl, my girl is really a boy, and there's some fertility suppression there, and use the notoriety generated by that pathologization of the child to elevate their social status among their idiot friends at the cost of the child's happiness, the child's physiology, and its future reproductive success. He's saying that parents, especially mothers, can play a role in damaging their own children to the point where these children cease to be reproductively or even economically successful later in life. And I'm going to talk about why that is so. What Peterson has correctly noted, hold on, let me turn on my chat box on screen as well. What Peterson has correctly noted is that it's not just this or that occasionally disappointed parent who is now supporting their child's gender dysphoria into a full-blown, surgically irreversible condition. No, the society at large is now equally complicit in the industrial scale attack on children and their genders, namely to produce a disaffected, sterilized, or castrated younger generation, meaning that Generation Alpha and Generation Z, right, who can never be expected to succeed in life since their forebears have actively sabotaged them to prevent their economic success and thereby also their reproductive success. Few of these youngsters will likely ever own their own home, and that will further reduce the number of children these generations are expected to produce. This leads us to the threat of a possible extinction of the Western middle classes. But the original stories of Snow White and also of Sleeping Beauty offer us a remedy, a spiritual antidote to the internalized self-sabotage of a sick society. The strange, self-destructive nature of the West is explained as follows. In a declining civilization, families discover that they are increasingly coming up short, financially speaking, but also emotionally, due to the stress of a society deeply preoccupied with economic efficiency and the demands of technological progress. Technology itself, of course, precisely arises in such societies that are already having trouble generating the wealth needed to comfortably establish large families. The technology is supposed to make life easier, but technology then also adds to the complexity to the world, creating new problems of its own. When reducing one's family size then already proves to be insufficient to deal with economic austerity, the families may feel that the naturally competitive nature of their children must be suppressed further by sabotaging them, by inhibiting the children, or by postponing their life's milestones. For example, by sending them down the track of higher education and highly demanding careers. You can imagine that if you go to university, that adds another 4 or 5 years to your life before you get started. Whereas others who don't do this, whether you can get a job right out of high school and you start making money, maybe you'll have a house by the time you're 22 years old. But those who go to university, they exit university at 22 or so, or 23 on average, and then they still have to get a job. So you see, you're going to be behind. And the question is, are you really benefiting from that extra education? Or are you merely postponing your life's milestones and thereby preventing yourself from being more reproductively successful? It is perhaps just a matter of culture that in the Western world, we have chosen to sabotage children using primarily transgenderism and homosexuality as the pathologies of choice. The whole LGBT spectrum is, in fact, unnatural, or rather, counternatural, and meant to harm those who've adopted its lifestyles. In other cultures, for example, men can be discarded as unwanted, surplus males, and then forced to migrate elsewhere, which is another phenomenon the West is now having to deal with. While we in Europe and in the USA and in Australia, Canada, South Africa, and other white places, while we are attacking the fertility of our own younger generations, we are absorbing insane levels of immigrants because immigrants can be paid less to do the same work and treated worse. And many migrants will also accept lower standards of living, certainly much lower than the children of white middle-class people are accustomed to. By the 2020s, we've seen a ridiculous rise in cases of transgenderism, namely an over 1,000-fold increase from 1950s levels. And let's not forget, the overwhelming majority of these cases of transgenderism involve boys now being raised as girls and men thinking they can be women. The share of girls, however, suffering from gender dysphoria is still relatively small. Up until the year 2000, there were practically zero registered cases of girls wanting to be boys in the USA. This has changed. How? Why? Girls doubting their gender is an entirely new phenomenon, but the causes for their transgenderism and lesbian homosexuality lie in the same root: a society that has become hell-bent on destroying the reproductive health of their younger generations. Please post this speech. Yes, I will. I will post it to jmk.info and at the Great Johannes on YouTube as well. I'll post the links later. The reason why I think transgenderism has become so popular, quote unquote, right? I don't mean popular, I mean popular, right? Popular is that homosexuality may still be a reversible condition since it is non-destructive and may depend on certain mental feebleness on the part of the person suffering it. But transgenderism is different. Transgenderism is all about permanency, permanent damage. Those who go on the track of having bottom surgery will, with great certainty, remain infertile for the rest of their lives. Transgenderism, then, has become a castration called posing as a lifestyle, promoted as something fun to try out, like a new outfit. Why don't you try a new gender on? Of course, the trans lifestyle, though promoted as healthy, healing, and medically beneficial, what do they call it? They call it medical affirmative care for children. No, this thing will never cure anyone's psychological depression, but it will rather worsen it. Research from Sweden has long proven that people who have undergone trans castration surgery have become more, not less, prone to committing suicide. Once the definitive nature of their mistake sinks in, one can only wonder about the mental turmoil that must grip these poor victims of a society that drove them toward making the biggest mistake in their lives, having their dick cut off, and their balls, and their vagina, and their breasts, and their womb removed. If parents are not involved in the sabotage of their children today, now the school system will be involved very much. Perverted teachers, government officials, and journalists will hype up the LGBT spectrum, yes, even to the point of transgendered males being rewarded with women's sports medals, for example, after beating up a biological female in boxing. From here follows further the normalization of pedophilia, for that too indicates an unhealthy reproductive impossibility by fetishizing infertile asexual bodies and so removing sexuality from healthy reproductiveness. Sex, as we can see all around us, has become a commercial activity, and access to women's and men's bodies has, in many cases, become a commodity traded over the transactional internet, if not to street corners. Women are selling themselves on OnlyFans as much as men are trying to get in touch with them on dating apps. This is messed up. What can we do to revert ourselves back to a fertile, virile society? Well, interestingly, Christianity may be the cure. I'm going to explain that. I'm going to quote one more time Jordan Peterson from that podcast, episode 558, on the role of the prince in the Sleeping Beauty, in the Disney version of Sleeping Beauty. I remember that the evil queen in Sleeping Beauty, says Jordan Peterson, Maleficent, and traps the prince in a castle. Her goal is to keep him locked up until he is so old that he can't find a mate and reproduce. When he dares to challenge Maleficent, she turns into a dragon that devours everything, into the full-blooded fury of nature itself in all its predatory catastrophe. The prince defeats Maleficent with a cross on his shield and the sword of truth, and he advances through the thorns that Maleficent has placed around Sleeping Beauty so that the prince can find the princess. That's the story of the young man's heroic rejection of the destitution of his life, possibility, and youth by the evil queen. So this is a story of a devouring mother harming her own son intentionally so that he will fail in life and will not be able to reproduce. Likewise, the 7 dwarves. So hold on, I have to mention that the prince is said to have carried a shield with a Christian cross on it and the sword of truth representing Christian truth. And it is using these weapons that he manages to fight his way through the thorn wall to find his princess Sleeping Beauty and give her the kiss that wakes her up from the 100-year sleep. And likewise, the 7 dwarves from Snow White allude to the number 7 that is considered holy in Christianity, like the 7 days of the week that were instilled upon Europeans under a Christian influence. There may be a quiet hint here as to why heathen Europeans ultimately converted to Christianity, because unlike the heathen beliefs, Christianity promoted fertility and reproduction exactly because it was under the shield of Christianity that low fertility heathen populations were awakened anew to break through the walls of self-sabotage and depression and to pursue a more virile version of life. Christianity, in other words, was once considered a radical counterculture that young people adopted in order to go against their less ambitious parents, namely by having large families again and thus reviving their race. And so you see that Christianity has been largely beneficial to the European heathen people because they were in a sort of slumber, like Sleeping Beauty, asleep, meaning unmotivated, unambitious people, right? And I don't mean to denounce my own ancestors, right? But they had a society that had settled in a state of depression that wouldn't allow their children to become more heroic and to have large families again. Christianity changed that because Christianity gave them the weapon to do so. This doesn't mean I am offended by the great mythology of the Norse mythology, nor by stories of Odin and Thor. Thor in particular, whose hammer represents a phallus and therefore male fertility, is matched in Norse mythology by Freya, the goddess of female sexuality. Thor, by the way, is why we call Thursday Thursday. It's Thor's day. And Friday is Freya's day, right? So we have their names in our Christian 7-day system, right? Freya is the goddess of female sexuality and love. But the more overtly sexual character of both Thor and Freya may in fact have been a response to the fertility of the early European Christians, i.e. the heathens produced a partly revised Norse mythology that was the heathens' attempt at increasing their own birth rates to try to ward off the demographic successes brought about by Christian missionaries. I have to repeat this one more time. The Christians succeeded in taking over Europe because they instilled a belief in higher birth rates in the followers of Christ. So young people who were fertile adopted Christianity because their heathen parents were oppressing them too much, right? Basically, the heathen parents didn't want their children to succeed and have large families. But Christianity comes in and says, no, you can't have bigger families. You just have to work harder and be more ambitious. Right? If you are planning to rewatch these Disney classics or read even the Brothers Grimm original versions, which I recommend, but make sure to watch at least the Snow White version of 1937 and the Sleeping Beauty version of 1959. The more modern versions, as we've seen recently in the past year, such as the new Snow White with Renee Zegler, you guessed it, it has come under the spell of feminist devouring mothers. Feminists have attempted to sabotage the very stories, both the heathen and the Christian ones, that used to expose the devouring mother's evil, the witch's evil. They have, for example, in that Renee Zegler version, perverted the dwarves into a troop of suckers who don't know how to take care of themselves, as though they needed a woman to tell them to clean their room. Whereas in the original story by the Grimm brothers, the dwarves are hardworking patriarchs who can support Snow White and protect her from evil. It is the dwarves in the original story who tell Snow White not to eat the apple, the witch's apple. How did this happen, though? How did Western societies become such a hostile place, so detrimental to the health and the success and the well-being of their own offspring? And all the while, Western families have been steadily reducing their own family sizes down from 6 during the 1900s to just barely 1 or 2 by the 2000s. But now by age 35, right, instead of by age 25, I think white women in the Western world have their first child on average over age 30, possibly age 35 already. Insane, right? So, for example, Muslim migrants don't just have more children, they have them 10 years earlier. And so you see that their generational cycles are faster, right? We have started massively importing precisely the 6 children of sub-Saharan African women, the 2 or 3 from Hindu women in India, as well as the surplus of unwanted Muslim sons from the Arab world, if not also the children from Latin America that their societies have equally discarded. How is it that people in Somalia are having 6 children per woman, in Nigeria 6 children per woman, and they're sending at least 5 of those to Europe, and then all of a sudden we are supposed to take care of them, while we are reducing our family sizes down to 1 child per woman or even no children, right? And why are we doing this? This is genocide. We need to do something about something, and that's where I think Christianity can offer us that weapon that we just discussed during that treatment of Sleeping Beauty. Western people are most certainly responsible for their own demise. I never said immigrants were the cause of our problems. I said immigrants were the consequence of our decline. But to reverse course, however, Western people, as in the stories of Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, must rekindle their reproductive fitness. And we have to do this on our own, from within, by breaking away from the forlorn boomer world, by revitalizing certain strengths buried deeply within our psyche. We cannot dismiss this insight that we too have become a slumbering society. Our leaders are evil witches whom we must defeat. The hundreds of millions of migrants are like the wall of thorns that we must burst through in order to have a future again. Again, we must embrace Christianity's fertile faith and take to heart this lesson to go forth and multiply. Christianity, then, shall prove to be, for the second time in European history, the weapon of choice in the fight against our dwindling numbers and the arrival of the hordes. That leaves me with just a brief discussion of Jordan Peterson's character and his intentions. Peterson publicly refuses to call himself a Christian, despite just having handed us that very Christianity as a patriarchal weapon to destroy immigrant birth rates with increased birth rates of our own. So what is Peterson really after? I'm not sure. I don't trust him. Maybe his excellent telling of the meaning of Snow White's tale is really a plot to increase birth rates for white women, just not with white men. Perhaps he too is just another globalist who thinks white women should be mated with the incoming Africans or Arabs. After all, isn't that why Peterson's daughter ended up in mongrel Tate's suffocating Islamic arms? To promote Muslim African mutts to white women? Alas, I think the white women aren't falling for the Tates and have already massively rejected the brothers from the cultural sphere. Either way, my advice to the white men of the West is simple. Be a radical. Be the counterculture. Have a traditional family. Being traditional is now being radical. And tell your sons, with sword in hand and truth in mind, to drive all migrants off our land. Thank you very much. This was my speech for today. I like the format where I do a speech because that means I can give you a lot of compact information for my show. It also makes my shows meaningful to post them back online as a replay. I will post this one. I'll show you the links now. Right. So you can go to Substack. Substack, www.jmk.info is where I collect all my assets, my videos, my books, my music, posts, publications, and so on. You can donate if you want to. Here's some links like paypal.me/the JMK. Or I guess contact me on YouTube at The Great Johannes. I will post this replay there as well. You can watch the full thing. I suppose I'll try to have some interaction with you now. We can talk a little bit because I haven't been reading your comments the whole time. Yeah, you love the live. Thank you, Seth. Gotcha. Yeah, this topic's so important right now. Yeah, I find it helpful that Jordan Peterson did that podcast episode because the content in it, if you watch it, it's incredibly. He's right, but I just question his motives a little bit. But yeah, we need to talk about what on earth are we doing in the Western world? Why are we harming our own younger generations and making them trans and gay and telling them that surgery is the solution for their mental health problems? No, it's not. Everybody knows it's not. So why are we doing this? Right? Why are Hollywood people mangling their children, right? And being proud of it or something like that? Like they're talking about castrating 8-year-olds now, right? Governor Gavin Newsom of California said he had an 8-year-old son and he couldn't understand why he would want to castrate him, but now he's 9 and now he understands it. Okay, what? Jesus Christ. You can't do that, no. All right. You were on Daniel Clark's live. He hopes you'll join him on his Sunday. Yeah, I think so. I think Sunday is fine because I do my own show from Monday through Thursday. But yeah, on the weekends or so, I can. I'd love to come back and have a little talk too. Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, the birth rates got below and so on. So there's all sorts of economic reasons why we're having a birth rate decline. It is harder to get by. It is harder to earn a house nowadays because of the competition in that globalism with China, with the rising Chinese middle class, and with India, and with Central Africans who want wealth. So yeah, competition has increased, but Christianity doesn't say that you have to be rich to have a big family. Christianity says you have to have a big family and then, well, figure out how to keep them alive, right? It's secondary. Money should not be our priority anymore. We need to be able to accept in the Western world, you know what? Our economies can dwindle, but we will rise. What's the problem with that, right? How long does it take for me to write a speech like that? Maybe, nowadays I got really good at writing, I think an hour, 1 hour and a half or so, sometimes 30 minutes, but yeah, be fruitful and multiply. Go forth, go hither and multiply, yeah. Is there an archive of all my streams? Yeah, it's on jmk.info. And then you have to go into the website and then click the podcast menu option. And there you have all my videos, including all the live streams. You can also go to my YouTube at The Great Johannes. It also has all my live streams there. And I'm building an archive on Rumble as well. Rumble/Johannes MK, but it's not finished yet. I'm still working on Rumble. Right. Right, the media controls the minds of the people nowadays, yeah. So this is what I wanted to explain as well. I told you about the evil witch, the devouring mother who harms her own children so that they cannot succeed in life. What has happened under feminism is feminism went after all the stories that used to expose them. So there were stories in our mythology and in our religious lore that warned us of precisely such kind of mothers, the devouring mothers and such women. But the feminists of the modern age have won the power to go after those stories and rewrite them. And that's what, for example, happened there with Renee Zegler in that live action Snow White, where she no longer marries, for example. Renee Zegler in that story also no longer needs the help of the dwarves. The dwarves are just idiots now who can't help her, and she needs to tell them what to do. So it's an inversion or a perversion of what used to be considered the truth. Snow White's story was a warning to young girls, watch out. If you have a bad mother who harms you and diminishes you and belittles you, you need to get the hell away from that mother, right? And accept that your beauty deserves a superior man, which is the prince in the story. The dwarves are like a hardworking patriarchal society, right? But in that society, or through the help of that society, a young woman can find her superior man, the prince, right? Right. Exactly like Ursula von der Leyen. Absolutely, you've got that right. It is how it is, isn't it? Ursula von der Leyen and many of these other European women, including Mark Rutte, right, of the former premier, now NATO leader, people like that, they are these devouring mother types or devouring feminists, really. Right. Right. So they say that the great replacement isn't happening, but if it is happening, it's a good thing. Right. Right. Yeah, Christine Anderson maybe is worthy, right? All right. Weimar conditions, yeah. We're in Weimar again. All right. All right. I enjoyed the live stream. It's more like I'm going to wrap it up now because I'm going to do like 30 to 40-minute shows. The point is to get a message through that is meaningful so that you can watch it again later, so that it's something you will want to hear again, maybe if you want to hear the full story. I'm going to be back again tomorrow. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to try to get people on the show to talk to, but I'm looking to talk to women. I'm not really, I see so many podcasts, guys talking to other guys, and I see that they all do that, and I don't want to do that anymore. I want to get women on my shows so that I can talk to them face to face, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and we talk about, these topics: diversity, immigration, violent crime, the gang rapes, right? Also the devouring mother aspect of our societies. I think women would have a lot to say about that as well. So I'm gonna ask around a bit and see. Charlie is on vacation, I saw, but when she comes back, maybe I will get her on, with or without her siege mask. Yeah, but I will bring those people on if I can get them on, and that would be very interesting. But because I've always said, the right-wing movements that succeed because they win the support of the young women who still want to have children. And like in the story of Snow White, right-wingers can be the dwarves who support Snow White, as in the original story by the Grimm brothers, who support her and protect her so that she can find a superior man and have a bunch of kids. Which is the whole point. If we men are not willing to get organized to support the young women to have the children that they want, right, then all is lost. And here I think Christianity can motivate both men and women. It is a perfect religion precisely for this job. So that's why. Right? All right. Then I wish you all the best. Wait, I'll show you my links one more time. You can also donate a little bit on like buymeacoffee.com/JohannesMK. Or go to my Instagram at @thegreatjmk, or my X at JohannesMKX. So see you again tomorrow, same time, and I wish you all the best. Have a nice evening.